You're listening to Season 3 of That's Not How a Baby Sleeps. I'm your host, Alicia Daishon, and I'm joined by my co-host, Eleni Katsinis. We're not your average sleep consultants, no cry it out or sleep training at all for that matter.
Hello.
Taylor.
Hi.
How are
you?
Good, how are you? This is Alicia.
Hi.
Good.
Nice to meet you, Taylor.
You too.
We're so happy to have you on. So can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and what led you into this work?
Yeah, so I'm Taylor. I am a registered nurse and lactation counselor. I started in 2015 in a pediatric intensive care unit as my first job as a nurse. Often floated over to the NICU to cover for them as well. And that's kind of how I got into, being a nurse and lactation counselor. The lactation counselor piece came after I had my daughter in 2018. The following year, I went on to get my certification, which was kind of already coming anyways, because I loved to float to the NICU and work. Not so much, I loved working with all the babies, but I especially loved working with the babies that were kind of getting ready to graduate out of the NICU, that were working on feeding and getting ready to go home, and kind of just supporting those moms in that aspect. So when I had my daughter in 2018, and I really struggled with breastfeeding, I thought, this would be a perfect time for me to get my certification, because I really want to be able to support these moms as well, and also just learn more myself. So
yeah. That's awesome. Do you mind sharing your struggles a little bit with us? If you want to open up about it, just like what you struggled with and I guess how you found support in those early years as a mom?
Yeah. So when I had my daughter, I did what most new moms do, but also thinking, oh, I'm a pediatric nurse. I work with these moms and babies all the time. I'll be totally fine. I don't need to get any, additional breastfeeding education. I thought what I knew would be enough. And I was totally wrong. And that's even with having some background knowledge. Many moms go into this and they don't know anything about, the feeding experience or having a newborn your first time around. So when I had my daughter, she likely had a tongue tie, which we're still in the works. She's 7 now, getting that all figured out. But I had no idea. And that also wasn't as widely talked about back then as it is now today, thankfully. But she had a tongue tie and we had an awful latch. So we had to use nipple shields. I was triple feeding, which was an absolute nightmare, cracked, bleeding nipples, crying all the time. Really struggling. She also was struggling with getting adequate weight gain. So we were at the pediatrician's office all the time, checking her for her bilirubin levels to make sure she didn't have jaundice and end up in the hospital on lights. So it was a whole thing. And I still struggled all the way up until probably like 3 or 4 months postpartum. And that was even with reaching out to get support with lactation counselors and whatnot. And unfortunately, there is such a stigma with lactation care, because there are some out there, just like with any other profession, that, don't keep up to date on the best practices or what's going on. And, there's a lot of issues with hospital lactation consultants who maybe have to fit so many moms in a certain time, and they have a protocol they have to follow. So I unfortunately did not receive the best care in the hospital either from those lactation consultants. Like, I was missized when it came to flange sizing to make sure you have the proper flange size for pumping. And I was told to use a nipple shield with absolutely no guidance, which, as a lactation consultant, like, we do not recommend you just throwing a nipple shield at a mom and saying, good luck, hope your baby latches. So there was a lot to learn. And obviously that experience has helped me be able to understand moms on a deeper level and know, exactly what they're going through when they bring their baby home.
Yeah. I feel like the nipple shield should just be a little bridge, right? It shouldn't be like a solution for breastfeeding long term, right? It's supposed to be a short-term, like, little tool to help mom get through. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's tough. But it led you to where you are now, which is like, a beautiful thing, of course. I know it's like we have to struggle a lot as moms, and then we lead into our profession. But it's great because we don't want moms to struggle like we did.
Yeah.
Well, I assume that's why you are deeply focused more on the prenatal breastfeeding education, right?
Yes, absolutely. Like, when I went into lactation care, I was like, okay, I wish I could help moms understand how important prenatal education is, because so many of us, like I said, just think we're going to go in and we'll figure it out when it's time. And what I try to help moms understand, because like I was there, I thought I too didn't need it and I would just figure it out, is we don't want to be learning this new huge skill in such a vulnerable time of our lives. Like, why are we trying to learn something that's so deeply challenging in many ways when we are postpartum and in diapers ourselves and crying all the time because our hormones are all over the place? Like, we should not be waiting to learn this skill. And we don't do that for birth either. You know, we prepare so deeply for birth because we know it's coming and we know we have to do it. And I think sometimes too, we think, you know, if breastfeeding doesn't work out, I can just give formula, and that's fine. That's totally okay if that's the journey you want. But many moms don't really think that through. And they just think, you know, we'll just figure it out. But then when it comes time to where if breastfeeding isn't working and they have to give formula, it can deeply affect their mental health. So it's just not something that I think that we think through well enough before we have our babies.
We think the same thing about sleep though, too. I'm like, it would be so helpful to just have some education on sleep, but we're always just so focused on the birth. It's just, we'll just figure out it'll be fine. And you're completely right. It's such a vulnerable time and you should be trying to learn that during that time when you're exhausted and recovering from birth in general. Like, it's actually crazy to really think about.
Yeah. We just prepare for, you know, that scary part that we know is coming, that we can all anticipate so much for labor. And then after that, it's just like, wow, you really kind of get slapped in the face with, you know, like you said, that exhaustion and just figuring everything out. So, yeah.
It's so exhausting. I remember I had a hospital birth and lactation consultants were really lovely, but they all had different like opinions on how to feed the baby or how often to feed the baby. I remember someone said, only feed her every 3 hours. Like, don't go before that. And one said like, feed her every like hour, 30 minutes on each side. I'm like, that means I'm feeding constantly, you know? So it's like two different sides. As a new mom, like terrified. I'm like, I'm so confused on who to listen to. Right. So it's like you said, in every profession, there's so much conflicting like advice. So it's really hard to navigate. But so what are some of the biggest misconceptions or unrealistic expectations you see parents holding about breastfeeding before birth? I know you already mentioned some.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think just not knowing the realistic expectations of what is actually going to come when you have a baby is the biggest thing. We don't really realize how much going into having a newborn is. And just like you said, like the sleep aspect too, I'm like a big advocate for that as well, which I know we'll talk about, you know, soon, but just knowing what can happen. It may not happen, but just knowing what can happen, I feel like is so important, because if you're prepared, you're going to have a better experience. And if it doesn't happen, that's great, but at least you knew what could happen when you were going into it.
Yeah, totally. And you feel like that probably impacts postpartum mental health and their confidence in motherhood, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like I was saying with the formula journey, you know, like so many of us know it's there if we need it, but that's, you know, maybe not what a mom was hoping for her journey. And so we can see a lot of mental health struggles when it comes to thinking what I should be doing, or, you know, what we think we're supposed to be doing as mothers. And then when it doesn't happen that way, it can feel like it's all on us and that, you know, we're the problem, when really it's, you know, your support system and just not knowing what you don't know.
I'm sure you get so annoyed with people saying like, well, I just have a low supply, or my body just doesn't produce milk, right? Like I'm sure you hear that, and it's probably something that drives you crazy, because it's like, right, like a Band-Aid solution for it, or you're not getting to the root cause of why mom has a low supply or why they're, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sure that just drives you when you hear that stuff.
Yeah, because there's so many reasons, and to have a true low supply is not as common as people think. And there's a lot of medical history that goes into that as well. And again, if you didn't get any education prior, many people go in with thyroid imbalances or PCOS and stuff like that and have no medical support leading up to it and just think like, well, I just can't make milk. And it's like, well, we can support you in other ways to help you have a supply to feed your baby. But, you know, if you don't know that about yourself, or that these things can cause that, it's like, how are you going to fix that?
Yeah. Oh, it's tough. So you're creating a mini guide about the first week home, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So what do parents tend to be most unprepared for during this time?
Yeah, so I know we touched on it a bit already, but I feel like the two biggest things are feeding and sleep. Just kind of not knowing what to expect when you bring a newborn home. A lot of people will say like the hospital, you have your baby and then you go home and the hospital's like, here you go. And you're like, okay, like I have this little human that I have to take home now and take care of. Like, what the heck do I do? And so I think just knowing everything that goes into feeding, like you said, like, in the hospital told you different things, like how often should I be feeding my baby? How many, wet diapers and poop diapers are they supposed to be having? And at what day of age? And, when is this a red flag? Or just all the little pieces that go into it, as well as safe sleep. Like, we're told on their back in a crib with nothing around them. And I obviously agree, like the AAP guidelines are there for a reason. However, we also have other guidelines that can help us make sure we're not falling asleep on the couch with baby or sleeping in unsafe ways when we are inevitably exhausted. Yeah. So just knowing again those realistic expectations, what actually is going to happen when I go home with my baby, because you really just don't know until it happens to you.
Yeah. Or you're calling the 24-hour nurse hotline like we did after like 2 nights of being home. We're like, what do we do with this baby? They're like, well, did you try feeding her? I'm like, no, it hasn't been 3 hours. I can't feed her. They're like, yes, you can.
Yeah. So another piece too is I also work for like our local hospital system. I still work pediatric triage. So I get calls all the time from first-time parents. I actually just worked this morning and got a call from a first-time parent for breastfeeding problems for a baby that wasn't latching well. And she was asking, if the baby hadn't had a wet diaper in 24 hours, like what should they do? So of course we brought them in right away. But this is just what I mean about how, and thank goodness there is that line that you can always call to speak to your baby's doctor if you ever have any questions. But it's just like, I just get so frustrated and disappointed that we're sending parents home with no information like this. Like they have no idea what they're doing. And I get it. I was there and I've supported so many family and friends and clients through this. I see it all the time, but it's just like, wow, the way we just send people home with newborn babies with absolutely no education to know what to expect just blows my mind.
So can you walk us through what normal breastfeeding and newborn behavior can look like then in those first early days?
Yeah. So when you bring your newborn home, often we'll, hear the baby sleeps all day and then they're up all night long. And, we're as parents not taking advantage of those hours because we're used to being awake all day and sleeping all night. So what I like to remind new parents, and especially when it comes to learning about lactation and how your milk supply works, is so important, because if you learned how, your milk comes in, your prolactin is highest in the night hours. So, from the hours of 12 to 5 p.m. 5 a.m. in the morning, your prolactin is highest, and that is when your baby is going to be feeding very frequently. And people think that their baby has their days and nights mixed up, when really, like, this is biology's way of having your baby help bring your milk supply in. Mm-hmm. So you of course have milk already there. You have your colostrum, but in order for your milk to transition, we need baby to really be latching in on the breast, or you're pumping if you choose to exclusively pump. We want to be doing that every 2 to 3 hours, and it does happen more frequently at night. So that is something that I always like to remind new parents, is it is normal for your baby to be waking up at night wanting to nurse, or you needing to pump, because that is when your prolactin is the highest.
I feel like that's such a hard thing for parents to accept, that they're going to not sleep, right? Or they're not going to sleep as they thought they would, especially in the newborn days, because they're so exhausted and they're trying to survive on sleep deprivation and stuff. Or they have their friend's baby who is sleeping 12 hours at 6 weeks, which we know is not really great. They shouldn't be sleeping that long of a stretch. They should be waking up frequently to feed. So what advice or reassurance or guidance do you find yourself giving those new parents during that first week?
Yeah, so really just a lot of helping them understand what's biologically normal, and also reminding them the importance of having your baby wake up at night and why that is actually good for them, because it reduces the risk of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, and it's just what your baby is naturally meant to do. So I feel like when you help new parents understand that sleep trainers out there and what we see in our, Western culture society, that a baby's supposed to be sleeping in their bed by themselves for 12 hours a night is just not realistic. And it's not how we're meant to be. I think that letting them know that ahead of time, like what, we as humans are meant to do, can really help you wrap your mind around that. I had this experience actually with my second baby. My first was a great sleeper, even exclusively breastfed with all of her issues. And we could talk about sleep forever. A lot of it was just her temperament. She was just a very chill baby and she could soothe herself. Like she liked to soothe herself. My second was absolutely not. And being even a second time mom, right? Like I already went through all these issues with my first, being a second time mom, I still, again, was like slapped in the face with another different, reality of like, why won't my baby sleep? What's wrong with him? And I knew, I knew that there wasn't, and I knew biologically, like, how he was supposed to be. But just wrapping your mind around that when you're exhausted and, your first baby slept a little bit better, it's just like, even like for second time parents, it can be a lot to manage what your expectations were. So I just feel like, it's just important to keep in mind that all babies are different. All experiences are going to be different. And, just again, keeping in mind that this is just how it goes sometimes.
Yeah. And that's really hard, having one that's kind of just a self-settler, easygoing, right? From the get-go. And then, having a second who's a signaler at night.
Yeah.
And needs a little bit more support. Even though you knew it was normal, it's still a slap in the face.
For sure.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. That's why with Nora, I've been through everything with her, like with sleep. And if we have another one, like I can handle anything, I feel like, because she was so challenging.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's better to have the first that's a little bit more challenging, and then like it can't get any harder than that. Right?
Exactly. That's how I felt with the feeding challenges, right? I was like, I've literally gone through everything with her. Breastfeeding will be great. And it was. Our breastfeeding experience was so much better. However, the sleep aspect was not. So it just goes to show, like, you're going to learn something new every time.
Oh, totally. Yep. So you include education on the Safe Sleep 7, even for parents who don't plan to bed share. Can you explain to us why you believe that's so important?
Yeah. So I always just educate parents about it, whether they think they're going to use it or not. I have many parents who are like, I'll never sleep in the bed with my baby. And I'm like, that's fine. I totally get that. I hope that is your journey. However, newborns can be up many times throughout the night. And especially for parents who maybe don't have additional support at night, especially, it's so important to know how to safely bed share if you are going to be taking care of a newborn at night. As a nursing mother, breastfeeding mom, I mean, so many times, even myself, I found myself dozing off, sitting up in the bed while I'm nursing my baby. And it happens no matter whether, you can try so hard to not fall asleep holding your baby, but it's going to happen. Knowing how to safely feed your baby at night, sleep with your baby at night, it's just crucial to keeping you and your baby safe.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Actually, I'm in Canada, but our hospital did send us home with Safe Sleep 7 guide, which was, I didn't see it at the time because I was just so out of it, but I found it a couple of years later and I was like, oh, this would have been really helpful to actually go through the documents that the hospital sent home. But yeah, it was good to see.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it just goes back to showing why this education before we're in the hospital and completely just gone through such a huge experience is so important. But I wish, the United States definitely got more on board with that, because there is just a lot of like fear mongering surrounding bed sharing. And especially, if you get on social media, you see so many large extremes there of people saying, well, if you bed share with your baby, they're going to suffocate. And it's like, there is a way to have this happen safely. And we would rather, if we're talking about nuance and mitigating risks, you know what I mean? I would rather have a parent know how to safely bed share than to fall asleep on the couch or unsafely in their bed with their baby.
I can't tell you how many clients that I've had that are on a couch with a baby. I'm like, I can't, I have to educate you on this. We can't have you in that situation anymore. It's not safe.
Yeah. Or the rocking chair. I see that a lot too. They're so afraid of bringing baby in the bed. they'll fall asleep in the rocking chair with the baby. Can you imagine how the baby is in the rocking chair, like all reclined awkwardly and not sitting up, like, you know, and they can just slump back there, and that's unsafe. But then you read a headline that says baby dies while bed sharing, but you have no idea the context around it, right?
Right.
It probably wasn't even in the bed, or maybe it was just a very unsafe situation, which is just really sad. Because, like you said, it's fearing these new moms, and they probably are bringing their baby in bed or not doing it safely or whatever. And I wish it was just better education around it.
I know. When I show parents what like safe bed sharing looks like in photos, they're always so surprised, because it's like, oh, there's like nothing in the bed. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of the whole point, is we're making it very, you know, as safe as possible, as if you had the baby in the crib, but you're there with baby, you know. So anytime I show them, I feel like it always helps, and it definitely kind of lessens some worries and fears. But it's just, again, like, it's just not talked about enough, and there's just so much like strict guidance, which, again, like I understand the meaning behind it, being a nurse, you know, working in pediatrics, like I get it. However, I feel like we could also save, you know, a lot of parents in scary situations by teaching this, you know, additional piece.
And we know that the fear is like, if you bring your baby in bed, you can never get them out. Also, that habit fear of like, you bring them in, they're never coming out. Like, I was just talking to a mom of a 3-month-old baby, and she's like, well, if we start co-sleeping now, like, I don't want him to always be in there. I'm like, don't worry, it's not gonna happen. Promise you, they're not gonna be sleeping in bed with you still. And if they are, that's lovely. Then you have a great
exactly.
It's tough.
I know. And again, that just goes back to like the sleep training, you know, societal expectations we have, that, you know, the wife and the husband are supposed to, you know, sleep in the bed with no children. And it's like, that's not how many cultures around the world do it either. Like, we're, you know, strictly looking at the United States here in Western culture.
Yep. And we always think that's so funny. We talk about it all the time, like co-sleeping ruins marriages. Clearly not, because families have like 5+ kids.
Yeah, literally. It happens somewhere.
Doesn't have to be in bed. So what are the most common breastfeeding challenges you see postpartum, and which ones are actually normal but feel very alarming to parents?
Yeah, so I feel like a really big one would be, in terms of breastfeeding, would be engorgement. So we see engorgement a lot, and you know, this is because it's part of a normal process that happens when your milk does transition. So when we go from having colostrum to having, you know, more milk coming in, we will sometimes see engorgement. And then depending on a mother's supply, how quickly milk comes in, as well as the mother's birth experience. So if she had fluids while she was in labor, if she had a C-section, all of these factors can affect the way your breast milk transitions. And again, many new moms don't know this. So when we're dealing with engorgement, if we're, you know, having a session with a postpartum mom, these are things that we always ask. And moms are like, you know, why do you need to know about my birth experience to know like what's going on with me and breastfeeding? It's like, well, it actually relates way more than you think it does. So engorgement is one of those big things. But again, by having support lined up already or early when you are postpartum, you can know how to like effectively manage that and get through it without dealing with clogged ducts or mastitis, which we often see causing moms to quit breastfeeding early because it's painful, it's uncomfortable. And who wants to be dealing with that when they're, you know, having a newborn baby who they're sleep deprived and exhausted with? So, you know, these are things that can be normal and can be helped and supported through, but many, you know, new moms think that these are actually abnormal things that are happening because they didn't have that prenatal education that told them what to expect when they were postpartum.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, you know how like you hear the phrase like, well, my milk hasn't came in yet, or like my milk and like I remember in the hospital, my breasts were so enlarged and like engorged like that. Like I physically couldn't hold them up. Like they were so and like I'm not even kidding. Like I had to pee, and this is TMI, but like Dave had to like my breast for me because they were so it hurt. And the only thing that it was obviously nursing and just like they like put like a really tight like bra or like band around me, and it helped because like it took the pressure off. Is that normal?
Okay, so did you have an oversupply with Nora or no?
I think so, yeah, because she used to like gag on me.
Okay.
Like overactive down. Does that make sense?
The fact,
okay.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And that's very common with oversupply as well. And the fact that, how long were you in the hospital for?
Oh, I think just like 2 or 3 days.
Okay. So that's like, as a first time mom, that's very early for your milk to have like come in, as we say. And so you probably likely just had an oversupply. And that's another thing too. There's a lot of misconceptions around oversupply. A lot of lactation consultants or just society will say, like, you've put yourself into an oversupply, because that can happen. But there are also lots of moms who just naturally, in their own body and hormones, have an oversupply. Like, they're just predisposed to having an oversupply. So it sounds like you're just one of those people. And you likely just had a lot of milk come in really fast. And so you dealt with that engorgement very quickly. Yeah, like you said, nursing can help, ice can help. Sometimes, wrapping can help a little bit too. So yeah, it's like everybody's different, right? Everybody's journey and breastfeeding experience is going to be so different.
Well, that makes sense. I'm glad that I know that. I do that because I was doing my own research, and I'm like, why is my baby like choking on my milk when I'm like nursing?
Yeah.
Like this feel normal, but like I'm looking it up, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have an overactive letdown, and like learning more about that, and just like it was really interesting because I had someone close to me that had a baby around the same age, and she had like really, really hard breastfeeding challenges and like breastfeed and had a really low supply, but she had a really traumatic birth. So there was just like the opposites. And I feel like I expressed what I was going through because she was struggling so bad in a different way. Yeah. But I was also struggling. But like, of course, it was amazing that I had so much milk, but it was still a struggle for me, because I'm like, I don't know how to manage this. Like she keeps spitting it up and she's like throwing it up, it's like, it was difficult. So I'm sure you hear all
100%. It's another one of those things where unfortunately it is such a vulnerable time in our experience that we can sometimes get defensive or, just in a way to protect ourselves when our mental health may be lacking. And so the whole low supply and oversupply, that can be another, like you said, hard relationship to manage because, moms are dealing with, these mental health struggles and issues with low supply, but moms with oversupplies are dealing with, just as many struggles too. And it's like, yes, it's wonderful that we have this excess amount of milk for our babies, but it does not come without problems and challenges. So it's just one of those things where it's like all moms need and deserve support. And, it's like, it's so hard when we're all struggling in our own ways, but every mom, your challenges weren't any less than hers. They were just different.
Yep. Yeah, totally. So how can parents tell the difference between something that needs support versus something that's part of like the learning curve of breastfeeding?
Yeah, so this just goes back to, kind of getting that prenatal education early. In my course, I teach everything about like what is a red flag and what is to be expected and normal, back to those realistic expectations. There are, some things that we say to look out for in terms of like what's going on with your newborn and yourself. Big concern a lot of parents have when they decide to choose breastfeeding, especially if they're exclusively nursing, is how do I know if my baby's getting enough milk? That's like one of the number one questions we always get. And there are ways that, you can know if your baby's getting enough milk, and it's not as scary as it can seem. We oftentimes want to just give a bottle and say, okay, like I saw 3 ounces in this bottle and my baby took 2.5 of it. So like, I know they got 2.5 ounces, but there are like very real ways that we can tell if a baby's getting enough milk at the breast. So I just, again, always go back to prenatal education and just knowing what is normal and what is not when it comes to having your newborn.
Do you do like weighted feeds? Is that like a common thing that people do? Because I know everyone loves that visual, as you mentioned, with like, okay, I know my baby took 2.5 ounces.
Yeah.
But are weighted feeds a common way to kind of tell if baby's getting enough?
It's an option for sure. It's not one that I like tell parents to do on their own often at home. If a baby is struggling with, making sure they're having enough milk or getting less wet diapers or not having a great latch, then yes, absolutely, we'll do a weighted feed. But at home, I feel like sometimes it can cause a lot of additional stress for parents, especially if they're not doing the technique, exactly as it should be done. And so then maybe their baby did take 3 ounces, but the scale is telling them 1 ounce because they didn't do one little thing the right way. That can cause, additional stress for them. So in terms of, if I'm telling a parent at home, like what to look for, I would say, make sure your baby is having this many wet diapers at however many days old they are. And I send them a nice little graph that tells them exactly how many wet diapers they should be having on what day. When your baby's at the breast, are you hearing, them swallowing? Are you seeing swallowing when they're drinking? Are you seeing kind of milk in their mouth when they unlatch, as well as how many poops they're having? And just making sure, your baby's having adequate weight gain when they go in for their checkups. These are all, simple ways that we can make sure at home that your baby's getting enough.
Amazing.
I feel just with sleep, it comes with how much milk you're producing for your baby, or how much you're pumping is determines the worth of you as a mom, right?
Oh my God.
Our babies sleep, if they're a good baby by eating really well and sleeping really well, then we're a good mom, which is obviously, not true. So sad. We all deal with that when we're working with new moms. We have to try to really uplift these moms and teach them it's okay, and not to get upset over the weighted feeds and the sleep schedules and tracking everything. It's really challenging.
Yes, absolutely. I tell new moms all the time, your worth is not measured by how many ounces you produce. If you have to supplement ever at all, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's totally fine.
That's great. So how do you help parents then trust their instincts in a world full of all this conflicting advice?
So I always just tell moms, your gut is usually right. And, if you've reached out and you're getting conflicting information, but you're still feeling like something is off, get a second opinion. There's been so many times, even myself, that I have felt something was, wrong with any situation with one of my littles. And I've gotten a second, third, fourth opinion. It actually took us 4 different pediatricians until I found the right one for my first baby. And maybe I was a little extra nitpicky because I'm a nurse. However, I was you don't have to settle that first time around. You're allowed to trust your gut, trust your instincts, and reach out for additional support or resources if it doesn't feel right for you. I always, just tell moms, really just kind of follow what feels right to you, but try to lean on trusted professionals. And if it's still not feeling right for you, just keep going. Lean into your support systems. If, they are not supporting you in that way that you feel is aligning with you, either just stop asking them or find new support. I just feel it's so important to protect our peace as new moms and, just try to find the support that aligns with how we're feeling, because motherhood absolutely changes you. Even before you have kids, you think that you're going to do all these things. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this. And then your baby gets here. And I see it happen literally with every single mom I've ever worked with, my friends, myself. You always think you're going to do it a certain way, and your baby gets here and it's your brain chemistry literally changes. And suddenly you're not saying that at all anymore. So just, trust your gut and follow your instincts.
That's beautiful. What pressures do you see right now with new moms facing the most?
I think right now it's just unfortunately, to do it all.
Yeah.
As women, we're expected to uphold the house and hold down a job, or to be the sole, caretaker of the household and our partners. And it's we cannot do it all. We have to find ways to get that support when we can, reach out for help if you are struggling, but just knowing that we are not meant to do it all. One of the things I've really been, leaning into lately and kind of looking, into is just how, we always say, find your village. And it's well, it's so hard these days. And especially, just kind of with the state of the world, it's I know it can be so hard for moms right now to find that village that feels right for them. Just kind of knowing that there is support out there, and just, you can't do everything. So ask for help when you need it.
That's great advice. So I know we touched on this a lot, but how can parents prepare emotionally, not just physically, for postpartum and feeding? I'm assuming just that support and village, like you said.
Yeah, I think finding, your support in your village, set shifts, again, going back to those realistic expectations and just kind of helping yourself understand. I went through this, like I said, with my second, that, this may not be the experience that you expected or you hoped for, but just kind of working in those mindset shifts of, like my baby is here, my baby is safe, I'm here and safe. Maybe my birth experience or my breastfeeding experience isn't going like I hoped it would, but I can control how we move forward from here. And also just therapy, honestly, like get that help early when you need it. Do not, push it off thinking that you need to be mentally strong or, that you should be able to handle this. Like therapy is there. Therapy is so helpful. 100% just reaching out and getting that help when you need it, because postpartum, your hormone shift that you go through during postpartum is absolutely wild. And you'll feel it. So it's like if you're struggling, you don't need to struggle alone, and you don't have to struggle quietly either. Like reach out and, get that help that you need.
Yeah, that's great. I remember listening to a podcast, and the one mom was saying even when she was pregnant, she booked all her therapy sessions postpartum just in case. Like she's like,
yeah,
them, I'm still gonna book them. And we talk about too, like your baby registries, like not putting any items on them, putting like postpartum care is so much more important than all the items, because the baby doesn't want any of that. The baby wants
right,
and you need to be your best, to help your baby and to help
100%.
yourself. So all that support is so much more beneficial than a fancy crib sheet.
For sure. I was actually going to say that as well. That was something I had written down, was like finding postpartum support, like therapy, like a specific postpartum therapist. They do like have resources out there where you can find that. Having that lined up when you're doing your prenatal education, learning about sleep and breastfeeding and all the realistic expectations you need to know before you bring your baby home. Having within there somewhere, knowing where in your area or virtually you could reach out to a postpartum therapist if you need one.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you have a membership coming up, right?
You're
promoting it?
It's coming up soon. We're actually working on all the final touches. We should be having a launch date very soon, but it's going to be the Essentials membership is what we're calling it. And it's with Kristen, my business partner, who is the lactation mentor on Instagram and her website and everything. But this is basically everything we've ever seen moms need compiled into one place. So this is going to include the prenatal education piece. So it's going to have our prenatal course where we walk you through everything that you need to know before your baby's born. And then we hope that moms will go through that, around 34, 35 weeks when they're pregnant. Of course, that doesn't always happen. So postpartum moms are always welcome. But we hope that moms will join in the prenatal aspect. And then once they've had their baby and even throughout, we're offering unlimited messaging with her or myself. We're going to take on, whoever joins the program will get unlimited messaging with us. We'll also have weekly Zoom calls where, you can come with any questions with your baby. Not even if you have any questions, just kind of joining for that support. We can kind of talk through like any challenges or any wins or just kind of what's going on in the week with your baby regarding sleep or breastfeeding or just any postpartum challenges. And then there's also going to be a resource library where we'll include like additional resources, because there's always so much more that goes with just breastfeeding. There's tongue tie issues or breast milk storage, like just all the things that go into the millions of questions that you have when you become a new mom. And so, yeah, it's going to be like a comprehensive all-in-one place. There will be a group chat too, where moms can kind of just talk to each other whenever they need to ask questions to other moms who are in it with them. So we're so excited to get this out there.
That sounds amazing. That is so great, especially for everyone listening, because everyone's listening from all over, like I'm in Buffalo, Alicia's in Canada. I forget where you're from.
Florida.
Okay. So we're everywhere. And it's nice that virtually. And I was just talking about this with somebody. Moms and women especially have such a hard time committing something to themselves because they think they deserve to like spend money on themselves. But when it comes to this journey that you're describing, this is like the most important thing to spend money on, because it can make or break your breastfeeding journey, right? And it can really shape how you're going to do it. So that membership sounds amazing.
Yeah, thank you. We are so excited.
I'm excited for you guys. I can't wait for it to launch. When I have another baby, I will definitely come, even though I've already done it the first time around. It's just even like you said, like knowing the stuff that like so many moms like come to us, or like I do in person, like local stuff, and they come for questions for me, but then they hear like all the moms talking and they're like, I forgot what my question was. I'm just like listening to all the other moms, like this just made me feel so much better. Even just like yapping to each other and just like venting about your mother-in-law, you know what I mean? Like all that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, it's so healing.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
The community piece is so important.
It's so important. So I know you talked about a lot about how like advice you give families, but if a pregnant or newly postpartum parent is listening right now and feeling overwhelmed, what would you want them to hear before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would just say, just remembering that, you're not alone and you can always reach out to somebody for support if you need it, but also just reminding yourself that you may be in a really hard phase right now, but it's not forever. There's been so many different phases of motherhood where, I'll look at my husband and I'll be like, my gosh, like we are struggling right now. Like, when will this ever end? And then all of a sudden, like a month goes by and you're like, wow, that's not happening anymore. Like we have reached the end of the tunnel. And it's so weird how it happens so quickly and you don't even realize it. Because in the moment, it doesn't feel like it's happening quickly at all. But suddenly, like that gradual shift, it just gets better and better every day. And you're looking back and you're like, wow, like I did that. We made it through that. So just remembering that, every piece, I saw a quote somewhere where it was like, every part of motherhood is a phase. And in some ways that's a good thing. And in other ways it's a bad thing because we're going to, miss certain parts of it. So just reminding yourself that, where you're at is not forever and it will get better. And there's ways of motherhood where it's going to get easy and then it's going to get more challenging, but it's always changing and just, kind of keeping that in mind.
Okay. So where can listeners find you and learn more about your work?
Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm at June and Lily. Pretty much any platform you can find me at June and Lily. I also have a website, which is juneandlily.com. And on there will be more about the Essentials membership. And soon we'll start talking about that on Instagram as well and kind of pitching the wait list so that you can join if you want to, be the first to hear about it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to connect with us beyond the podcast. You can find me on all social media platforms at moonbay.sleep. And for more sleepy goodness, you can head over to Instagram and follow Eleni at Rooted in Sleep. Until next week, keep embracing the chaos.